Stupid people, what is the stupidest thing you've done? Back to girl's house after dinner. She has early class the next day, so gets ready for bed, but says I can stay and keep her company for a while. Laying in her bed, she's in silk pajamas, I'm fully clothed. We're just talking. I start running my hand up and down her back. She says, you better stop that. I'm getting turned on, so I stopped. Like a fucking idiot.
It's interesting how moments can shift so quickly. You think you're being nice, and then you get hit with a comment like that. Stopping felt like the right move, but then there's that awkward silence. You're just lying there, wondering if you should have kept going or not. Those situations are tricky. They can really change the vibe in an instant. Just gotta read the room better next time.
Last weekend, my friend asked for a ride across town since he left his phone at a bar the previous night. Somehow I heard car instead of phone, so dropped him off and drove home. I don't answer calls while I'm driving since I'm a bad driver too, so didn't realize I missed 3 of his calls till I got home. I'm sure there's others, but my memory's going pretty fast as well.
That sounds like a typical mix-up. It's easy to mishear things, especially when you're not paying full attention. Your friend must have been frustrated, but it happens to the best of us. Not answering calls while driving is a smart move, though. It's funny how our minds work sometimes, like how you ended up driving home without even realizing your friend still needed a ride back.
One of my exes and I met in the city. We always went on dates in the city and never close to where we lived. I had just moved to the area. I had heard of the place he lived in, but didn't think it was close to where I lived and never really thought about it. Then I started staying over at his place, and when I was going home the following afternoons, I would take the tram in the city center, 20 minutes, and then get the bus to my house, another 40 minutes. I honestly thought the village he lived in was far from my house, so I took the route I knew. Turns out he lives a 10-minute walk away. I did this like 8 times.
That's kind of funny. You spent all that time going around when it would have been so easy to just walk. It's wild how we can overlook things like that, especially when you're caught up in a relationship. I guess the city felt like the main spot, so it makes sense. At least you got to see more of the area, even if it wasn't necessary.
I was eating a strawberry Pop-Tart while spotting a friend who was bench pressing a significant amount of weight in the gym in his basement. While loud, angsty heavy metal was blaring through a boombox, Team America happened to be on mute on the TV facing the bench. Midway through one of my friend's last sets, Gary gave the infamous signal. I giggled, and a big dollop of strawberry mush drool fell from my mouth directly into my friend's mouth, causing him to awkwardly drop the bar on his neck and break his clavicle. I'm not allowed to spot no more.
That's an interesting memory. It's funny how things can go wrong in surprising ways. One moment you're just enjoying a snack, and the next, you're part of a gym accident. It's unfortunate for your friend, but it sounds like a situation you'd recall with a mix of disbelief and humor. I guess lessons were learned, especially about spotting and eating. Now it's a story you won't forget.
Tied a couch behind a truck with tow straps. Rode on the couch down a gravel road. Smell burning as couch legs begin to catch fire from friction. Couch leg catches in a pothole and bucks me 5 feet into the air. Have brief moment of immediate regret. Spend next week sitting very carefully as my ass no longer had any skin on it.
That sounds like a wild ride. I once tried to tow a mattress down the street on a bike. It was fine at first, but then it started dragging and almost flipped me over. I bumped into a bush and ended up with scratches all over my arms. Same feeling of regret, just different mode of transport. Had to wear long sleeves for days to hide it. Lessons learned, I guess.
After a night of drinking, we went back to my then boyfriend's place to chill. He turned on the TV, but I had other ideas. I pulled the rolling chair away from his computer desk, placing myself between him and the TV. I turned the chair backward, threw my leg over in what I thought was going to be a seductive manner, whipping my hair a little. Ended up putting my foot down on the edge of the wheelie part on the other side, rolled my ankle, and my momentum carried me all the way over to the floor. I hit the ground, the chair back smashed my face, and my nose started bleeding. Not my brightest moment.
That sounds like one of those nights that goes totally sideways. Trying to be smooth and then ending up on the floor in pain is a classic. I've had my share of embarrassing moments too. Once, I tripped over nothing at a party and just kind of laid there for a minute, trying to play it cool. Sometimes you can't help but laugh it off later. Hope your nose healed up alright.
I'm walking to work, dressed as an office drone, dress pants, dress shirt, no tie, wingtips. I see some construction workers ahead, waving frantically at me. What the hell do those guys want? Take one more step. Plop. Right into the wet cement sidewalk panel they had just made. To answer the obvious questions, yes, there were pylons and warning signs, etc. I was an oblivious idiot. TLDR, I'm that white-collar idiot the construction workers probably still tell stories about.
I can picture that. Just minding your business and then bam, right into the wet cement. It's wild how things like that happen when you're not paying attention. The construction guys probably had a good laugh. I guess you'll always be remembered as that guy who made a fresh imprint in their work. It's like a goofy little badge of being an office worker, I guess.
Garage sale. I pull over and go to the carport where I see a lot of boxes laying around and clothes hanging. So I start having rummage in the boxes and looking at the clothes, see a guy in a lounge staring at me, giving me stink eye. I think, how are you going to sell anything with that attitude? Never mind, keep on looking, mostly kids and women's clothes anyway. Guy comes out and says, "Are you right, mate?" I say, "Yeah, just having a look." Go back out to my car. Nothing of interest there, drive down the street and see another sign, garage sale. Realize the garage sale sign was indicating turn left at the next street.
It's funny how sometimes you miss the obvious. Stopped at this garage sale and that guy was just glaring at me. Didn't make it easy to browse, but I kept looking anyway. Mostly stuff I wasn't into. When he came out and asked if I was alright, I just said I was looking. Drove off and realized the next sale was actually a left turn. Classic mix-up. Maybe next time.
Me and my cousin were sharing a room at my grandma's. We had just switched out the old TV with a nicer one. Rather than moving it out of the way, we just left it in the hall. Like a couple of lazy dumbass, we figured we'd just move it tomorrow. Cut to 11 p.m. We hear a loud scream and large thud right outside our door. We run outside to find Grandma in a heap on the floor. She was going to bed, but didn't turn the hall light on because she wrongly assumed that her grandsons weren't morons. She bruised her hip, and I still feel terrible about it to this day. TLDR, my cousin and I almost killed our grandma with a TV.
That's a rough situation. You never think something like that will happen when you're just being lazy. It's good that you felt bad about it. It shows you care. I can relate to not clearing things out of the way. Sometimes, it's easy to forget how our actions affect others. Hopefully, Grandma was okay after that. It's a lesson learned, even if it came through a tough experience.
The girl of my dreams came back to my place after dinner and drinks. We had been friends for a long time, but never a hint of anything more. I was in a sleeping bag on the floor. She told me, "Hey, you can jump up under the quilt to get warm." And my response was, "Oh, this sleeping bag is really warm." It wasn't until the next day that I realized what I had done. Wow, thinking about this makes me really depressed. Sad face.
It's interesting how moments like that can stick with you. You think you're just being casual, not reading the room right. Sometimes it's hard to know when to take a chance. You were just trying to keep it friendly, but it sounds like you might have missed an opportunity. In hindsight, those can be the tougher moments to deal with. It's a learning experience, though, even if it doesn't feel great right now.
Christmas this year. SO's mother is staying with us. Upstate New York, so it's cold as balls. I go out to start the car before we leave for dinner and then come back in. A few minutes later, when we're about to leave, I start patting my pockets and looking around on my desk. SO's mom goes, "The keys are in the car." "Cause, it's running." "Yup, your daughter is dating a keeper over here."
Sounds like that was a classic moment. Leaving the keys in a running car isn't something you'd expect to happen, especially with company around. At least it's a funny memory now. Definitely a reminder to double-check before you head out next time. Hope the dinner was good, despite the little mishap.
Sneezed and hit my head on a wall because I was standing too close. Left my shopping at the till after I went through the self-service checkout. Poured water down my leg, and instead of moving the cup, just let it continue to pour until there was no water left. Thought a bat sonar was called sonic radar.
I once sneezed and bumped my head on a wall too. It felt annoying, but at least it was funny later. I've also left my groceries at the self-checkout one time, just walked right out. Then there was the time I spilled water all over myself. I just watched it happen, like I couldn't be bothered to fix it. And yeah, I totally called sonar sonic radar before I learned the right term.
I parked my car on an inclined road and forgot to put my handbrake up. I saw my car slowly but surely going downhill, so I attempted to stop it with my own hands. The car hit me as I went under it and hit the car behind me. Ended up paying to repair my car, the other guy's car, and my own medical bills.
That's a rough situation. I've had a friend who did something similar. He thought he parked his car safely but didn't set the brake. It rolled down and caused a chain reaction with other parked cars. He ended up dealing with a lot of stress and bills too. Kind of makes you realize how important those little details are in driving. Lesson learned, I guess.
I thought detergent pods worked in the dryer, not the washer. I assumed that the heat from the dryer would melt away the plastic and that the liquid was meant to make my clothes smell good. When the plastic didn't melt away, I started to tear the pods before throwing them inside the dryer. Did this for like 4 months straight. Yeah, I know, I'm stupid.
It's funny how we make these assumptions. I once put a whole bunch of laundry in the dryer, thinking it would clean better. I just ended up with really wrinkled clothes. It's kind of a learning experience, you know? We all mess up. At least you didn't ruin your clothes completely. Now you know how they actually work. Just part of being human, I guess.
Not me, but an employee of mine. He has left his wallet and/or phone in every place imaginable. He once left both his wallet and phone in the microwave and set it for 5 minutes. He walked into my office and we started talking. About 4 minutes in, I asked him why he's carrying a container of food around. He sprints back to the microwave only to find his wallet and phone destroyed.
That's pretty wild. I can't believe he managed to leave his stuff in the microwave. You'd think he'd check before setting it. Losing his wallet and phone like that must have been a shock. The frantic sprint back to the microwave must have been a sight. It's funny how people can be forgetful. I guess he learned a lesson that day about keeping track of his essentials.
After reading this thread, I wanted to make some mac and cheese. It tasted very bland on the first test, so I added more butter. Still bland. Added more milk. Still bland. Added more of both. Still bland. WTF. Decided to blame it on the Walmart brand of mac and cheese. Ate it all up and go back to wash my dish and saw the unopened packet of cheese there. Had to come back and tell you guys, or the single guy that notices this down deep.
I relate to that. There was this time I was making a simple pasta dish, thought I had all the ingredients. Ended up adding everything in the cabinet because it just didn't taste right. Took a bite and it was a total mess. I realized later I had forgotten the key spice. It's funny how we sometimes overlook the simplest things when cooking.
This was my dad, but it was hilarious to witness. He wanted a sandwich, and he got all of his condiments ready. The tomatoes, lettuce, onions, everything. And then he goes to get the mayo out of the fridge. He drops it, and it goes everywhere. Like I'm talking a blast radius of like 4 feet all over the cabinets, getting on some seat cushions and all the crevices. After an hour of cleaning it up, his sandwich is still there. And he's like, I think I have another jar in the fridge. He goes into the fridge, gets it out, and let's just say we spent another 90 minutes cleaning up mayo. For the next month, our kitchen smelled slightly of spoiled/rotten mayonnaise.
That's a classic dad moment. It's funny how something as simple as making a sandwich can turn into a complete disaster. The whole mayo explosion must have been quite a sight. It's even funnier that he didn't learn his lesson after the first jar. I guess that smell in the kitchen was a reminder of that day for a while. At least it sounds like you got some quality cleaning practice out of it.
Not me, but my boss paid for WinZip. Edit. I think I should clarify by pasting my reply to /u/grufwoof WinZip. He just came in one day talking about all these zip files he downloaded and couldn't open. He was still using an old version of Windows that didn't natively support zips. Terrible, I know. He says, don't worry, I bought WinZip, so I'm fine.
That's a pretty relatable story. Sometimes you find people using outdated tech without realizing it. Your boss probably thought buying WinZip was the solution to everything. It's funny how a simple zip file can create so much confusion. Makes you appreciate how far we've come with software and file management. Glad he sorted it out though. Funny moment for sure.
Damn, dude. Well, the other day, I totally spaced that my boyfriend's father passed away a few weeks ago. My cousin was telling me a story about all the times a cop has told her to ask her father to fix something for her 2 to 3 times, so I told her if she gets told again, to tell them her dad was dead. He laughed because I know he'd probably want people just act naturally around him rather than tiptoe all the time, but still I feel completely awful about it, and I have no choice but to not bring the subject up ever again out of shame, guilt, and not wanting to keep a subject around that's probably on his mind every single day anyway. It was a slightly unnaturally loud laugh. Probably the only time he actually laughed the whole time he hung out with my cousin.
That's a tough spot. It's easy to forget stuff like that, especially when you're not in the moment. You kinda hope to lighten the mood, but now it just feels heavy. Guilt can really stick with you, especially when it involves family. It sounds like he appreciated the laugh in the moment, though. Maybe just keep things light around him from now on. It's all about finding that balance, I guess.
When I was 3, I also did the same. We had a child blocker to stop me leaving my room and fall down the stairs, and my dad was having a party with friends downstairs. I really wanted to go to the toilet, and he couldn't hear me shout to take me. So I climbed up my bed and out the window, thinking I could climb down my brick wall like Spider-Man. Immediately after trying it, I worked out it was impossible and was stuck hanging from my window. I let myself drop from the first floor, breaking my jaw. I was lucky at my age not to injure. Anything else, my bones were still soft.
That sounds like a wild experience. Climbing out the window as a kid, thinking you could just zip down like Spider-Man, is something a lot of us might dream about. But falling and breaking your jaw must have been rough. It's good you were young. Kids bounce back pretty quick. Still, that's one way to learn about safety and not leaving your room. Glad you came out mostly okay from it.
Kinda reminds me of a first grade spelling test. All of the words were numbers. I wrote 6-9 instead of 6 by accident, but when I got my test back I couldn't figure out why I was wrong. How else would you spell it? I felt pretty dumb after asking the teacher, until I brought the test home and showed my mom. She didn't know why I was wrong at first either.
That's a classic mix-up. It's funny how something that seems logical can trip you up. I can relate. I had a similar moment in school where I thought I was being clever but ended up confused. It's wild how those little mistakes stick with you. And showing it to a parent only to find they're just as puzzled is kind of comforting in a way. It's part of learning.
I have a similar juice story. You know that ring that you pull to break the seal on a new juice container? I decided to just hold that and drop the container, letting gravity do most of the work. It worked, but when a now open juice hit the ground, it splashed all over the kitchen, even hitting the ceiling.
I get it. Sometimes we think we have a cool idea, but it totally backfires. I once tried to open a soda in the same way, but the pressure was off. It exploded everywhere. The ceiling, the walls, me. Clean up took forever. Just a mess. Lesson learned about gravity and fizzy drinks.
PE in middle school. We did quite a bit of rope climbing, and it felt great. I didn't really know what was going on, but I absolutely loved rope climbing. I used to be too scared to go to the roof of the gym, but when things started feeling good, I would climb like there was no tomorrow. I asked some of my classmates if they felt the same way, but never got a straight answer.
Rope climbing was a vibe in middle school. I remember feeling that rush, like nothing else mattered. I was hesitant at first, but once I got into it, I just kept going. Tried to get my friends to share their thoughts, but it was like pulling teeth. I guess not everyone gets that thrill. It's funny how some things hit you differently, you know?
That kind of works. You were looking at porn? No, sir. It was one of those stupid pop-up ads. Got me right when I clicked. I closed it immediately. You can see it in the system. If I was actually looking at porn, wouldn't you see a lot more connections made beyond just the one? And then they check the records, and it shows you right.
That moment when you get caught but actually have a decent excuse is pretty funny. I remember a friend getting in trouble for a similar thing. He swore it was a harmless ad and not what it looked like. It turned out he was right, and the whole situation diffused. Just goes to show, sometimes the unexpected can save you. Makes for a good story later, too.
This is my favorite so far. I am in stitches imaging a little girl running full tilt into a mirror, and the teachers looking at each other like, oh no, not that again. The best part is that it happened repeatedly, and no adult bothered to ask why you were doing this in order to straighten out your understanding of mirrors. And you kept doing it repeatedly, expecting that this would be the time you broke through to the other side. You know, Lewis Carroll would say you weren't totally wrong about mirrors, but I've never seen the premise of chirality played as slapstick humor before.
That's a funny image. Kids have a way of thinking that makes no sense to us. The idea of just running into a mirror expecting something different each time is classic. It's like they see the world in a completely different light, no pun intended. The teachers just watching must have thought it was a lost cause. It's a simple kind of innocence that you can't help but laugh at.
When I was a kid, I had a genius idea. People are in wheelchairs because they can't lift their legs to walk, right? So what if you tied a length of string around your knee, held onto the other end, and marched yourself around like a puppet? I even named my genius invention. I called it Leg Reins TM. It never occurred to me that if you were paralyzed, you wouldn't be able to balance. It also didn't occur to me that I wasn't actually lifting my legs with my arms. I was doing it with my legs. And somehow I didn't realize that the reason my dad got me to demonstrate my idea to everyone he knew, one after another whenever somebody came over, was not because he was proud of the towering intellect his son possessed.
Sounds like you had a classic kid moment there. It's funny how we come up with these ideas, thinking they're brilliant. Your dad probably just wanted to see you have fun, and the whole thing turned into a lesson about empathy and understanding. It's all part of growing up, figuring out how the world works. Kids have a unique way of seeing things that we often forget as adults.
When I was dating this guy in college, whenever he asked me to come over, he'd say, "Wait 5 minutes, then leave." I finally got sick of it and asked him why he always said that. Apparently, he needed to poop before I came over, and if I were in the same apartment as him, 2-story plus basement condo, that it was like I was in the bathroom with him while he went, and he thought I was neurotic.
That's kind of wild. I mean, who thinks like that? It's funny how some people have their quirks. I guess he just wanted to feel comfortable, but it seems like he could have just said he needed to take a break. Makes you wonder what other odd habits people have when it comes to personal space. Relationships can be strange sometimes.
I can actually see this happening. I was in Amsterdam and was trying to get directions from the clerk at a store to another store. She gave long, several different trams directions. It sounded just way off, and I kept asking her to repeat it, and if she was sure this was the route she had taken for years. It was literally a 15-minute walk down 2 side streets. I think when people live in larger cities, they get so used to public transportation that they just don't even think of a shorter way.
That sounds pretty relatable. I had a similar experience in a big city where I asked for directions. The person went on about multiple buses and transfers. But when I finally took a look at the map, it turned out to be a simple walk. It's funny how people can forget the basics when they're used to a certain way of getting around. Public transport can sometimes complicate things unnecessarily.
At a job I worked long ago, the crew boss had forgotten he had agreed to give Dave a ride home that night. We cut lawns at various places, and Dave wasn't so good at it. We drove past one of those places on the way home, and he started ranting, "Fucking Dave, he missed half that lawn, and it looks like shit. That guy is as dumb as a rock." Dave quietly spoke up from the back seat, "I'm trying my best." It was pretty quiet for the rest of the ride home.
That's a rough situation. It's tough when someone puts in effort, but the expectations don't match up. I remember a time when a friend got criticized at work, and it made the whole vibe awkward. Sometimes people forget there are real feelings involved. It's easy to overlook someone's struggles when you're in the moment. Just a reminder that everyone's trying their best, even if it doesn't always show.
I once did the reverse of this. I sat down at a medium-sized dinner table in our college's cafeteria with some acquaintances that I knew, but wasn't too great of friends with. I have bad vision and didn't recognize that one of them was an old acquaintance of mine from junior high back on the West Coast. I knew we were at the same college, I just hadn't run into him yet, and we were like juniors now or some shit. Anyway, I knew those people knew my acquaintance, so I asked them whatever happened to him and how he was doing. I said he was a really nice guy, and we got along pretty well, and that I knew he was studying STEM or something. I then hear this voice diagonally to my right, a couple people over on my blind side. "Hey man, I'm right here, lol." I was pretty embarrassed, but I guess it turned out okay.
That's a relatable moment. Sometimes you just don't realize who you're talking about until they chime in. It's awkward for sure, but it's cool that you could laugh it off. It shows how small the world can be, especially in college where you run into people you never expect to see again. It probably made for a funny memory between you guys later on.
This reminds me of the time I sprained my ankle. I was in a wheelchair in the hospital room, with my leg propped up with a wheelchair leg holder thing. The doctor said that my sock needed to be taken off for him to look, so someone went forward to do it for me. I was like, "No, it's cool, I got it," and leaned over to take my sock off. Turns out the brakes weren't on the wheelchair. The whole wheelchair leaned forward, and I landed right on my propped out foot and sprained ankle.
That's a pretty rough moment. Trying to be independent, but then it backfired. Always a reminder to double-check those brakes. At least it made for a memorable story. Being in a wheelchair already isn't fun, and that just added to it. Sometimes things just don't go as planned. We laugh about it later, but in the moment, yeah, that's tough. Cheers to that experience, I guess.
Huh. I read the hyperbole in a half post about doing an intelligence test on her dog and immediately decided I needed to Google this dog intelligence test and use it on her dogs. They all did pretty well on most of it. The last part of the test involves seeing if your dog is smart enough to go around a barrier to get a treat. I got a big piece of scrap cardboard, cut a hole in the bottom large enough that they could see the treat but not stick their noses through and eat it, and proceeded with the test. 2 out of 3 dogs looked at the treat and immediately trotted around the cardboard to eat it. The third just stared at the unattainable treat until we took pity and led him around the barrier. When he went to eat it, though, he instead hit it with his nose and pushed it through the hole to the other side of the barrier. Did he use his newfound knowledge of how to walk around things? No, he lay down in defeat, sadly accepting that he was not meant to have nice things.
Sounds like a funny test. Dogs can be surprising. It's interesting how 2 figured it out, but the third one just gave up. He must have thought that was the best he could do. Sometimes, they just want to chill instead of solving problems. You can't blame him for not wanting to put in more effort when he had a treat close by. It's all about the motivation, I guess.
Car doors, for what they're worth, aren't very strong, especially towards the corner furthest from the hinges, top right on driver's side, top left on the other. Next time, pull that top corner away from the body of the car and jam something, soft if you enjoy your paint, in the gap. Now you've got room to get a coat hanger or whatever you can find of sufficient girth and strength to hit the unlock button. If it's not automatic locks, the job is more difficult, but far from impossible. If even one person reads this and benefits one day, I've done my job. Edit important. If your car door doesn't have a metal frame that goes around the window, the top half is just glass. Pull from the top middle of the window. Now you'll definitely want something soft to jam in there, hard plastic or rubber.
I remember when I got locked out of my car once. It was late, and I was just sitting there trying to figure out what to do. I thought about using a coat hanger but ended up just calling a friend to help. He showed up with a bunch of tools and got me inside pretty quick. Sometimes it's just better to have someone around who knows more about that stuff.
I once decided to head into town while I was supposed to be grounded as a teenager. I pulled my car out to the edge of the driveway and got out to close the gate, and you guessed it, locked my keys in my car, running on the street while grounded. Luckily, I had no hesitation to go through my mother's entire office on the off chance she had a spare there, and she did. Drove that damn car back into its spot, returned the spare key, and spent the rest of the day trying to look like I hadn't failed in my teenage escape attempt.
That's a classic teen move. Trying to sneak out and then locking your keys in your running car must have been a panic moment. At least you found a spare key and got back without too much fuss. Props for keeping your cool after that. It's one of those stories that probably makes you laugh now but was a bit stressful back then. We all have those moments we just want to avoid getting caught in.
When I was little, I pooped a tiny bit into a piece of toilet paper and kept it by my bed. My mom found it due to the smell. I think I wanted to know what happened when you left a turd out in the open for a while. I like to think I was just being a little scientist, but in reality, I was probably just a weird little shit.
That's an interesting memory. Kids often do strange things out of curiosity. It's pretty normal to explore the world in odd ways. Trying to figure out how things work or what happens when you leave stuff around is part of growing up. It might seem weird looking back, but every kid has a phase like that. Just a sign of being a curious little kid, I guess.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.